Okay, Francis, over to you.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 45th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. I think actually this is an old version of this. I think David's is now not on there anymore.
That's true, but he's getting ready to start another one.
Oh, it'll be current again, so I'll just
it's not Journey of the Soul, but yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just keep checking in. Anyway, all episodes of this and the Secret Teaching series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Tunnell Secret Doctrine or Secret Teachings. This month we'll be moving into Volume 3 of Colonel Olcott's old diary leads, Red Letter Month, which opens with a story from HPB's childhood. A fascinating story. So could we get a reader for this page?
Lynn, can you read that, please?
I love the juxtaposition of these two photographs in this.
Well, they're both relevant to the subject matter if you pay attention.
I would imagine. I have elsewhere mentioned HPB's inheritance of the fiery temper of the Dolgorovskis and the terrible struggle it was to even measurably subdue her irritability. I will now tell a story which I had from her own lips, and the incidents of which had a most lasting effect upon her through life. In childhood, her temper was practically unrestrained, her noble father petting and idolizing her after the loss of his wife. When in her 11th year, the time came for her to leave his regimen and pass under the management of her maternal grandmother, the wife of General Fediev, born Princess Delogorky, she was warned that such unrestrained liberty would no longer be allowed her, and she was more or less awed by the dignified character of her relative. But on one occasion, in a fit of temper at her nurse, a faithful old serf who had been brought up in the family, she struck her a blow in the face. This coming to her grandmother's knowledge, the child was summoned, questioned, and confessed fault.
Okay, another reader, please.
Joe, please.
The grandmother at once had the castle bell rung to call in all the servants of the household, of whom there were scores. And when they were assembled in the great hall, she told her that she had acted as no lady should in unjustly striking a helpless serf who would not dare defend herself, and she ordered her to beg her pardon and kiss her hand in token of sincerity. The child, at first crimson with shame, was disposed to rebel, but the old lady told her that if she did not instantly obey, she would send her from her house in disgrace. She added that no real noble lady would refuse to make amends for a wrong to a servant, especially one who had by a lifetime of faithful service, had earned the confidence and love of her superiors. Naturally generous and kind-hearted towards the people of the lower classes, the impetuous child burst into tears, kneeled before the old nurse, kissed her hand, and asked to be forgiven. Needless to say, she was thenceforth fairly worshipped by the retainers of the family. She told me that lesson was worth everything to her, and it had taught her the principle of doing justice to those whose social rank made them incapable of compelling aggressors to do rightly towards them.
Thank you, Joe. Wouldn't you love to see a Masterpiece Theater series on HPB's life? That'd be something. Of course, it'd have to be written by a high initiate, or it'd be incredibly inaccurate. Okay. A quick review of the new format. The verse under consideration appears on the left, in the left colored panel, with the particular phrase being referenced in bold. On the right is a photocopy of the page of the Secret Doctrine that we're working on. The highlighted paragraph is reproduced in the central area, which readers always read from. Okay, last month we stopped in the middle of this first paragraph of the B section, which references an army of the sons of light stand at each angle, and the Lepika in the middle wheel. They say, it is good, or this is good. Let's start by rereading the paragraph, since it's been a month. And, yeah. So could we get a reader for that middle section, please?
Yes, Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
The army at each angle is the host of angelic beings, Diane Choans, appointed to guide and watch over each respective region from the beginning to the end of Manvantara. They are the mystic watchers of the Christian Kabbalists and alchemists, and relate symbolically as well as cosmogonically to the numerical system of the universe. The numbers with which these celestial beings are connected are extremely difficult to explain, as each number refers to several groups of distinct ideas, according to the particular group of angels which it is intended to represent. Herein lies the nodus in the study of symbology, with which, unable to untie by disentangling it, so many scholars have preferred dealing, as Alexander dealt with the Gordian knot. Hence, erroneous conceptions and teachings as a direct result.
Thank you, Carrie. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph as a whole? Last month, we considered the meaning of the army at each angle and took a look at the Theosophical Glossary's definition of Dhyani Chohan. So first up for consideration this month is they are the mystic watchers of the Christian Kabbalists and alchemists. We learn from De Perucker that the mystic watchers of the Kabbalists are the silent watchers in Theosophy. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yvonne, can you read that? There you go, hopefully.
Now, there are many silent watchers, as has been pointed out. The silent watcher is, in fact, the hierarch or supreme hierarchical head of any one particular hierarchy of the numberless hierarchies in the cosmos. The one spoken of so inspiringly by H.P. Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine is the chief of the Dhyani Buddhas governing this fourth round on this planet, Fundamentals of Esoteric Philosophy.
Thank you. So this is also the name given to the planetary logos, Silent Watcher, one of the many names. Okay, next up, and relates symbolically as well as cosmogonically to the numerical system of the universe. HPB doesn't expand on this, saying only the numbers with which these celestial beings are connected are extremely difficult to explain, as each number refers to several groups of distinct ideas, according to the particular group of angels which it is intended to represent. In 1888, same year that the Secret Doctrine was published, HPB formed the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society and began giving out instructions whose availability at the time of their introduction was limited to accepted students, but later was published in her collected writings, Volume 12. On the front page of this document, HPB writes, "Dear, I forward you herewith a copy of the rules and pledge for probationers of the esoteric section of the TS. Should you be unable to accept them, I request that you will return this to me without delay." So clearly she had in mind to start an exoteric school that would prepare people for initiation, starting with probationers. But then after her death, these teachings were included in her collected works, as shown here. So granted, this tells us nothing about, wait a minute. First of all, let's read this before I comment on it. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Let the student remember that number underlies form and number guides sound. Number lies at the root of the manifested universe. Numbers and harmonious proportions guide the first differentiations of homogeneous substance into heterogeneous elements, and number and numbers set limits to the formative hand of nature. Know the corresponding numbers of the fundamental principle of every element and its sub-elements. Learn their interaction and behavior on the occult side of manifesting nature, and the law of correspondences will lead you to the discovery of the greatest mysteries of macrocosmical life. HPB Collected Writings, Volume 12, 517. Do you want me to go on?
Sure, you're doing such a great job.
From Amitabha, no color, or the white glory, are born the 7 differentiated colors of the prism. These each emit a corresponding sound, forming the 7 of the musical scale. In the allegory of Padmani, the jewel of spiritual ego in the lotus, or the symbol of androgynous man, the numbers 3, 4, 7, 10, as synthesizing the unit man, are prominent, as I have already said. It is on the thorough knowledge and comprehension of the meaning and potency of these numbers in their various and multiform combinations, and in their mutual correspondence with sound or words and colors or rates of motion, represented in physical science by vibrations, that the progress of a student in occultism depends. Ibid, 519.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this passage? Now, granted, this tells us nothing specific about the relation of numbers to angels and dhyanis per se, except to say that their numerical correspondences demonstrate through color and sound, and that through their various geometries may be found their correlative interrelations and interactions. Suggested in this emphasis on number is that we go beyond seeing these great beings as personae, recognizing them instead as embodied and consciously directed manifestations of the potency of number itself. Proof of this is found in the origins of these great beings. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Sure, I'll read that one. In the world of being, the one point fructifies the line, the virgin matrix of cosmos, the egg-shaped zero. And the Immaculate Mother gives birth to the form that combines all forms. This gives the keynote to all the later divine sons from Immaculate Mothers.
Thanks, Biel. So this keynote is a near infinite geometrically determined variety. As described in stanza 3, verse 7 of the SD, the one is 4, and the 4 takes to itself 3, and the union produces the sapta, in whom are the 7 which become the tridasha, or the hosts and the multitudes. We have studied in some depth the idea that both pi and phi are not numbers per se, but rather great creative potencies set into motion from the realm of no number and resulting in numbers, and the numbered. The means by which these super-rational potencies do their work is through the, quote, particular group of angels, who, in their turn, oversee the hosts of elementals that form the solar system and the cosmos. This is a fundamental shift in our way of visualizing the higher beings, which is that we move from the idea of them being personages to so transparent to the purpose and plan of deity that they're entirely conditioned and provide no resistance. Excuse me. And provide no resistance whatsoever to that plan, and that demonstrates, in accordance with their particular purpose, their particular part of the plan, and that particularity is distinguished by number. So it's quite a shift to move to that from the persona. In fact, you could really say that the visualizing great beings as personas, is an exoteric understanding, and seeing them in terms of their directed potency through number is a much more esoteric way of seeing. Okay, let's see here. Where am I? All right. Any thoughts or questions on anything in this paragraph? Okay. Up next, could we get a reader, please? This references the first divine world is ready. The first is now the second world.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, the first is the second because the first cannot really be numbered or regarded as the first, as that is the realm of noumena.
Noumena. Yeah.
Noumena in its primary manifestation, the threshold to the world of truth, or SAT, sought, through which the direct energy that radiates from the one reality, the nameless deity, reaches us. Here again, the untranslatable term sought or beingness is likely to lead into an erroneous conception, since that which is manifest cannot be sought, but is something phenomenal, not everlasting, nor in truth even sempiternal.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Any thoughts or questions about this short paragraph? Or actually the first part of a paragraph, which will continue on the next page. Okay, first up. The first is the second because the first cannot really be numbered or regarded as the first, as that is the realm of noumena in its primary manifestation. This statement takes us back to the idea of no number. The first, introduced in HPB's commentary on Stanza 4, verse 4. Could we get a reader for this?
Yes, Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Thank you for unmuting. The army of the voice is the prototype of the host of the Logos, or the word of the Sefer Desera, called in the Secret Doctrine. One number issued from no number, the one eternal principle. The esoteric theogony begins with one, manifested, therefore, not eternal in its presence, if eternal in its essence. The number of the numbers and numbered, the latter proceeding from the voice, the feminine vach, Zaharupa of the 100 forms, or nature. It is from this number 10, or creative nature, the mother, the occult cipher, or naught, ever protecting and multiplying in union with the unit one, or the spirit of life, as the whole universe proceeded. Could you please translate that, please?
Please what?
Translate it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, happy to, to the degree that I'm able to. This mostly deals with these three qualities of the realm of no number, which lies within the beingness, as opposed to beingness, of the first logos. This is pure abstraction, pure spirit, formless. The realm of one or number lies within the beingness of the third logos, who was the first singularity, from which issues numbers, those seven creative agencies and their hosts, who in turn produce the numbered, the myriad forms of nature. So that's the skeleton that this hangs on.
We could almost draw it in a paradigm, and she is stating this in this context so that we can have a better recognition of the level at which she is using numbers and numerology to help us formulate I guess substance, all that the numbered, the myriads of that in which we live, form. The numbered refers to form. Number refers to form. Numbered.
The numbered refers to form. Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you asked that, because that takes us all the way back to what is she doing here? What she's doing is at least sometimes directly and sometimes very indirectly, and sometimes she really just goes off on tangents, and sometimes she doesn't actually engage the subject of the verse at all, which is why I attempt to describe what these verses mean after her commentary. But sometimes she really does dive in. For instance, here, the first and second is actually indicated down here, where it says the first is now the second. So what she's doing is elucidating in trying to describe the nature of the verse. And in this case, what that leads to is the realms that we just discussed, right? The first is truly the realm of no number, even though it's, language prohibits it from calling it what it truly is, because you can't actually have a first. And she makes that clear, right? Because the first cannot really be numbered. The first is the second, because the true first is an emanation from spirit, from no number, from that realm of no number. And this has appeared in previous verses, in previous stanzas before, from the no number. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Francis. Great. This is
you're welcome. Right. And we're going to be diving into that a little bit more here. Let's see. Let me find my place here. So next we have here again, the untranslatable term sat, Venus, is likely to lead to an erroneous conception, since that which is manifested cannot be sat, but is something phenomenal, that which is manifested, not everlasting, nor in truth even sempiternal. Sempiternal just means unchanging, literally always eternal. Sempi, always. Semper fidelis, right? Okay, always true, or always faithful. So let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on sat. It's an important concept. Could we get a reader, please?
Christine, can you read that for us, please?
Thank you. Sat Sanskrit, from the verbal root as, to be, being, the real, the enduring, fundamental essence of the world. For Sat is in itself neither the existent nor being. Sat is the immutable, the ever-present, changeless, eternal root, from and through which all proceeds. But it is far more than the potential force in the seed, which propels onward the process of development, or that is now called evolution. It is ever becoming, though never manifesting. Sat is born from Asat, and Asat is begotten by Sat, the perpetual motion in a circle, truly, yet a circle that can be squared only at the supreme initiation, at the threshold of paranirvana. Thought is not being, but beingness, since whatever is manifested is something phenomenal, not everlasting. Sat, pure being, Chit, pure thought, and Ananda, bliss, together signify the state of the absolute. And my bookkeeper, I don't know if any of you know about the bookstore we have here in Michigan. The Mayflower Bookstore is one of the biggest occult bookstores in the country.
Wow, terrific.
Pass that on to you. It's been in existence since 1971, the year my son was born. That's how I remember it. But he always uses these three phrases, so he's exactly who I thought about. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. What's your website?
Oh, I don't have a website, but his is Mayflower Bookshop.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. That's great. And best of luck for, I hope it lasts forever. Yeah. I know that there's been a number of great bookstores that have gone out of business, that were oriented towards spiritual matters. So congratulations for persisting.
50 years. 50
Amazing.
Years.
That's extraordinary. Really, kudos. Okay.
Okay, we have a hand. Greg, you want to go ahead and say your comments?
Go ahead, Greg.
I was thinking about in your use of the term Sat, or with her use of the term Sat, because Sat is also associated with the most healthy expression and fooding habits from the perspective of seeking out the most pure foods and essence. So when we eat sattvically versus tamasically or other variations, we are that's part of it too. But then Sat is also associated with, could also be associated with the 0 point described in the last paragraph, in which the second emerges out of the first, because the first is the 0. If you link them together and synthesize it all, then they become the 0. And from there, we get to the 1, the very first, which is actually the second. It's like it's the merging, it's the synthesizing, it's like the second aspect of the great monad. It's the synthesizing aspect of all of us, in a sense.
Yeah, some good references there. Thank you. Sattvic may indeed have its root in Sat. It's we have those 3 states, which is Rajasic, Sattvic, and Tamasic. And Sattvic represents the balanced, as you say, healthier mode, but it also is used in as just a description of a pure energetic. One way of seeing it is the upper point of an equilateral triangle with the baseline of the triangle representing the pairs of opposites in Rajasic and Tamasic. So that's one thought there. This is a question for anyone in general. What is Asat? A-S-A-T. If Sat is born from Asat, how can any, let's see, how can I say this? If Sat is the ultimate and final absolute, how can it be born from Asat? The answer is a bit tricky. Any thoughts? There's not 100 hands that flew up? Okay.
There's one thing, the trick is it's circular. So Sat is born from Asat, and Asat is begotten by Sat.
Yeah, the key is really in this illustration on the left, which is, in a way, you could say that it's an esoteric description of involution and evolution, which is that in the asat, which is not being sat, not sat, right? Asat, that you're in the stage of, which is represented here by the square, which is any type of form being, and then you come into sat, and then you move, and then from sat, asat comes into being. So you have this, and it's cyclical and circular.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. During the 8th webinar of this series, some years ago now, I created this compilation based on the descriptions that had been introduced to describe Sat, or beingness, up to that point, which was actually pretty early in the Secret Doctrine. And I was just struck by how many ways HPB described this phenomenon, this non-phenomenon, I should say, called Sat. So I think it'd actually be worth to just read, to get a reader, please, to read through this column, just the one on the left. We won't deal with the other. And as this person is reading, just contemplate each concept, and maybe, you know, these mini descriptions will take us a bit closer to this sense of the unknown realm of Sat. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, Robert, if you'll read, but I want you to hold off for just 1 second, okay? I got a comment from Greg, which is, isn't this the paradox of the chicken and the egg, which comes first?
Yeah, but in that case, well, I'll just say yes. I won't get into a discussion about that. It's a little different, but yes. Because, you know, the egg also has an egg. The egg, in a sense, neither come first, you know. But in the spirit of the idea of the chicken and the egg, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Robert.
Okay, Sat, beingness.
You forgot one. Start at the very top.
Absolute abstract space. Sat, beingness. Parabrahm, night of Brahma. Brahma, neuter, the unmanifested. The dark mystery of non-being. Absolute negation. The deep, abstract waters of space. Space, the eternal anupadaka. The unconditioned mukta. Cosmos in eternity. The noumenon. Infinite cosmic space. Limitless, ever-present space. Absolute, eternal, infinite all. The omnipresent unity. Divine unity. Divine essence. The ever incognizable deity. The one infinite and unknown essence. Abstract, ever incognizable presence. the mundane egg, the one circle, the one life, the one self-existing reality, the ever-present eternal abstraction, the causeless cause, secondless reality, undecaying supreme root, omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle.
Thank you, Robert. So this was just in the first, 20 or 30 pages of the SD, that just in the course of her commentary, HPB brought forward these terms for the same idea. Any thoughts or questions about this list?
I'll say something.
Yeah.
Isn't this is obviously the first of the propositions in the proem in the Secret Doctrine. So if the boundless immutable principle is represented in these two, absolute abstract space and absolute abstract motion, but aren't a lot of the names in this list on the left actually that one immutable principle? And so it kind of precedes, I mean, it's an absurd word, but absolute abstract space.
I'm not sure of your question there.
Okay.
Rephrase your question.
Okay, so there's one boundless immutable principle. That's the first
Right.
proposition in the proem, okay? And it says in the Secret Doctrine that it can be represented in these two, the absolute abstract space and the absolute abstract motion. Okay?
Right.
So in other words, the boundless principle precedes these two, which are representations of it. So
yeah, though it says, she also says it's funny because she contradicts herself a bit. She begins by saying that absolute abstract motion is a fundamental attribute of absolute abstract space, while at the same time saying that it has no attributes whatsoever, right?
Right.
And then later she says what you just stated, which is that from absolute abstract space, this Chit or Mahat emerges, right? I think it's an angels on the head of a pin kind of question, because we couldn't possibly determine, which. So it's just in terms of its philosophical value that we could, consider that, right? I tend to like the second better. That it seems to me any form of attribute at all takes it out of the realm of what, for instance, absolute negation. How can you have absolute negation if you have Mahat? Well, possibly it's possible, but I would tend to put this as a further stage myself. Yeah.
Okay. I guess for me, there's a poetry in these things too, which is interesting. Like when she says that boundless immutable principle, in the words of the Mandukya, is unknowable and unspeakable.
Yeah.
There's a kind of beauty of language there that I think
there really is. I agree. And it's also completely futile. This one thing I love about this is how futile this, we're talking about language, which is isness. It's being. Language is a manifestation, and yet we're trying to describe that which is unmanifest, right?
Yeah.
So it's, if it absolutely nailed it in every way, you would just have one term here, but none of them do. So what you have is just this effort, to describe the undescribable, and I appreciate the poetry of that, right? I even wrote a rap song based on this, There's a boundless, immutable principle, absolute reality beyond human thought, because it's poetry. and in some ways, you could say the best poets are striving towards this, even if they're unaware of that, you know. But thanks,
That's-
Robert, for the reading.
It's the beauty of having these three images right next to it.
Yeah, which does, you know, in some ways says more.
Exactly, yeah.
Because
Okay.
the very first words in the SD are "I have before me," right, or in the poem, "I have before me on an impermeable image that," and then she describes what she's seeing. Of course, it's impermeable because it's etheric. Okay, where in the heck am I? So the paragraph continues on the next page here, as you can see on the right. Could we get a reader, please, to finish off this paragraph?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
It is coeval and coexistent with the one life.
Hang on a sec,
Secondless.
Carrie, hang on just a second. I need to back up to get the connection here. So we just read this. You're getting the understanding it's not likely to lead to an erroneous conception, blah, 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 but it is something phenomenal, not everlasting, et cetera, and now, okay, it is. So she's continuing to describe the nature of Sat. Go ahead.
Okay. It is coeval and coexistent with the one life, secondless, but as a manifestation, it is still a Maya like the rest. This world of truth can be described only in the words of the commentary as a bright star dropped from the heart of eternity, the beacon of hope on whose 7 rays hang the 7 worlds of being. Truly so, since those are the 7 lights whose reflections are the human immortal monads, the Atma, or the irradiating spirit of every creature of the human family.
Thank you, Carrie. So the old commentary beginning with "a bright star" references
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry. Sonia asks, what is coeval?
It's equal in it occurred at the same time. You know, so we're all coeval because we are at this point incarnate at the same time. You can look it up to check me, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. Okay, so this old commentary beginning with "a bright star" references the absolute as the heart of eternity. It's really beautiful. I'm going to read it again, in fact. "A bright star dropped from the heart of eternity, the beacon of hope on whose 7 rays hang the 7 worlds of being." Okay, the bright star being the refulgent glory of Oyaohu the Younger, for those of you who are around back in the 4th stanza. The 7-in-1 third logos, who reflects itself in the human monads, or as stated in HPB's collected writings, the regent of every planet star, the parent monad, shoots out from itself the monad of every pilgrim soul born under its house within its own group. These 7 lights are, cosmically speaking, the 7 spirits before the throne that issued from the 3rd cosmic logos, shown circled there at the top, which in turn have their systemic reflection in the 7 sacred planets. But in fact, every group of 7 is coming from the one. So it's a fractal mirroring down of this original 7 spirits before the throne at each level. You can see how that is described here. Any thoughts or questions about this concept?
Yeah, Greg says, 7 sisters of the Pleiades, the 7 brothers of the Great Bear, emerging out of the one Sirius.
Well, it's emerging from the one, which is the essence of each of those constellations before manifestation, but not from Sirius. Sirius is its own reality, its own cosmic source, you could say. So the Great Bear does not issue from Sirius. But the concept is there. It is 7 from 1, right? And you can see if you keep going down, right, that out of the 7 schemes, out of one of the 7 schemes, like for instance our Earth, you have the 7 chains, and out of each chain you have 7 globes. From each globe, 7 root races. From each root race, 7 sub races, right? And it goes all the way up, even though these higher ones are not articulated. The highest one being this, where I have my arrow here, that's our solar logos. That's from what the 7 planetary schemes issue forth from. And this solar logos is one of 7 systems that is called the 7 systems of the one about whom not may be said. And that, in turn, there would be 7 of those greater systems that would belong to a still greater, et cetera, right? But this isn't, you have this line, but also off of each one of these lines, you have an additional progression. So you can imagine, you can see how quickly you reach diversity as you move from the 7 spirits before the throne. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Yes, we have a hand.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead, Trudy.
I just wanted to ask, the 7 globes of our Earth chain, does that mean we come through all the other planets before we get to Earth? Or what does it mean?
No, okay, if you follow this up, the 7 globes of our Earth's chain represent a chain. So the 7 globes of the chain that is called the Earth chain, because each chain has its own name, the Earth chain being the 4th of 7. That Earth chain, that single chain, has 7 globes, which belongs to a group of 7 chains, which make up our Earth scheme. Okay, so no, that's not what's meant. Now that's a whole separate issue. What you brought up, I think there are, those that move among the planetary humanity, but for the most part, DK doesn't talk about that. He talks about progressing in accordance with this single humanity up through the subraces and root races, which make up a globe. Right? On each globe is 7 root races. Okay. So, for instance, Atlantis was the 4th root race of our current globe, globe D, for lack of a better name. And ours is the 5th. The Aryan race is the 5th root race of this globe D.
Yeah. So there's 2 more root races to go.
That's correct. And and they will be massively progressive. We'll be moving into higher mind and our Buddhic nature by the 7th root race, progressively, right? But even the subraces, for instance, we're in the 5th subrace of the 5th root race now, which is very much mind development oriented, monastically oriented. When we move to the 6th subrace, there will be a massive advancement and people will be much more, those who are truly of that subrace will be much more connected to higher mind. So, just even a shift from one subrace to the next shows a massive shift in consciousness. So it gives us some perspective of what this, of what is indicated by this chart. It's humbling to say the least.
It's very complex, isn't it?
It's complex, and yet the pattern is so repeated that it's both simple and complex at the same time. It's the 7 from the 1, and that pattern then continues out into all diversity. Okay.
Okay, that spawned a whole bunch of
I bet
comments
it-
and questions. And
Good.
first was Sonia. She says, "Will you explain the change in chains and globes in detail?" And now I also see her hand up. So
Let's hear a question first, and then
okay, go ahead. Oops, her hand went down.
Okay. Well, simply stated, the chain.
Hello.
Hi.
Well, I wanted just to express my interest to hear really a lot about that. I don't know if you plan anyway to do that in the future about the change in the globes.
Well, first of all, this material in reference to all of these is all throughout the Secret Doctrine. So we've looked at it before in previous webinars when it's brought up in the commentary, and it's brought up as we move. When I'm in my 90s, and you all are in various ages, and we get into the second volume, that's the fundamental subject matter. But even before then, you find that what we're doing here is just this grand involutional descent into form with each subsequent stanza, right? And this stanza has a lot to do with the 7 that issue forth from the 3rd logos. The previous stanza 4, dealt a lot with that logos itself, the refulgent glory of Oyaohu the Younger, right? This stanza has a lot to do with the 7 expressions. So that's why we're looking at this point. But really from here on out, we will be looking at this consistently, right? On and off, right? So, but the short answer, too late, to your question is simply that there are 7 globes in every chain, right? So, and remember, everything is spiralic. So as you move through the globes, you have an involutional 1st, 2nd, and 3rd globe, and then you have a 4th, which is physical, and then you move evolutionally up to the 7th globe, which is more abstract. It's less physical. There's very specific elements that manifest at each level. For instance, globes C and E are watery, and globes B and F are airy, etc. But even the nature of those elements on those globes is going to be somewhat different than what it is on our globe. It's just by analogy. But again, back to your question, for every chain has 7 globes. We are now in the Earth chain, which is the 4th chain, and it has 7 globes. We're also in the 4th globe of that 4th chain. So we're at the densest point. Atlantis was the fourth root race of that fourth globe, of that fourth chain, making it the densest of all. And by the way, we're the fourth scheme. But with the Aryan race, we've turned the corner in the 1,000+ races, sub-races, I don't remember which, of the scheme, of our Earth scheme, we've just once removed from the dead center of the most physical fourth, right? Because we moved to the fifth. But that's all important because it has set us onto the evolutionary arc of the scheme. Does that make any sense at all to anybody? If it makes sense to one person, then I succeeded. You're welcome. Okay. And if you have any further...
Maybe I can do a joke about what you say. Hello?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to
you're welcome.
just to make a joke, maybe.
Yeah.
Based on what you say, we can say maybe that we didn't do so bad in Atlantis, in fact, after all. Because,
well, you know, the first...
I was just saying that we didn't do so bad
in Atlantis, right? Well, you know, the first 3 subraces were right on course. And it was only because of the lack of development of mind that the Dark Brotherhood was able to permeate humanity of the 4th subrace, of the 4th root race. And of course, they also were greatly helped by the fact that it was the densest point in the evolution of the scheme. So if the Dark Brotherhood is going to attack, it is going to be at that densest form aspect because that's their orientation, right? So it was really, in a sense, predictable. Okay. All righty.
Go ahead. Robert, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I do. As I recall, this diagram I've seen it before in Cosmic Fire.
It is. It's directly from Cosmic Fire. I just redrew it.
And I think that the source of it was the Theosophists sometime in the 1890s or something, whatever.
That sounds right, yeah.
So what's interesting about this is here we have the 7 solar systems of the one about whom more may be said. And above that, way above that, obviously, is the kind of Christian terminology. That's the 7 spheres before the throne of God, which the Tibetans sometimes uses to refer to the 7 planetary schemes also. So I just thought that it's kind of an interesting mix of the esoteric terminology and the Christian terminology.
Yeah, well, DK uses this term, 7 spirits before the throne of God as well. You know, there's nothing inherently Christian in, you know, this term. You have to, you know, in fact, you could say that in a sense, the 3rd logos is the throne of the 2 higher logoses, right? Because it's a substantive aspect of the logi, right? So it's you know, I because I don't read Christian literature much, I wasn't even aware that. But now that you mention it, I do remember seeing that this in Christian literature. But it certainly isn't used here for that reason. I think it's actually an apt term. I'm sure there is a much more esoteric term once you delve into the secrets of initiation. You're given ever higher terminology, you know, to describe these higher states of being. And I'm sure at some point there's probably a name for this phenomenon that the very uttering of the name would, you know, light your neighbor's house on fire so they don't give it out, you know.
I think it's just so mind-blowing that we have the 7 systems about whom naught may be said. And this is way above that if you keep looking at the
Exactly. Yeah, here you are. You can't say anything about this, but you can sure say something about this up here, right?
I like what you said about the throne, though, in terms of the third logos. That's a nice image. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all you can do. I mean, language is pathetic, and and they acknowledge that here with the "not may be said." There's really nothing that can be said about this, and so that's acknowledged, but nonetheless, they do have this moniker. Anyone else?
Yes, Yvonne's had her hand up for quite a while. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What's above the 7 solar systems? Is it 7 universes or galaxies? How does that go?
Yeah, it's different. First of all, it's very veiled. You have, making up our solar system, the 7 planetary schemes. The solar logos, of whom those 7 schemes are the chakras within, is this dot where my arrow is. You can see that, can't you, BL?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So suggesting that here you have 6 other schemes
Yeah.
that make up this greater being. We know that Sirius is part of this. Do you know any of the others, BL?
I think Alcyone is one of them that's projected, and maybe Orion, or I have a.
So it's, the information given on this is pretty spotty. You have what?
Somewhere I have a list of what they're projected to be. It's all speculation, number one, but it's learned speculation.
It's learned speculation. I don't think DK ever just lists these. He doesn't just sit down and list them in order of what these are.
Okay, the one above that, the sun, the 7th one, do we know what that is? Or you have above that, the 7 solar systems, about the one who not may be said. That, do we know what that is?
Okay. This one is the one about whom not may be said. So there are other, and I may mention that the crown chakra of the one about whom not may be said contains the 12 constellations that affect the Earth. So that to me just totally takes this out of any kind of rational, logical way of charting this, because you're talking about thousands of stars just in those 12 constellations, right? And all of those are part of this head center of the one about whom not may be said. See, so it gets more and more abstract, even in terms of the description of it. But, you can hold it together long enough to realize that there would be 6 other beings of like consciousness as the one about whom not may be said, which holds these 7 great systems plus, right? As I mentioned, the constellations and its head center. So there'd be 6 more of those. Of course, at this point, there's no information whatsoever,
Thank you.
It's pretty limited. And, astrology is not my strongest suit, even though I've studied it. So I don't have these others. I would be interested in knowing, BL, if you can pull that out of your hat at some point.
I'll look for it. Somewhere I do have a list of, what it is. I'll look for that. Okay, Christine's got her hand up. Go ahead, Christine. Christine, did you want to say something?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right. And Greg says, for example, how do each of us define what we might call the kingdom of God? And with a kingdom, you have a throne. I think this gets back to your discussion with Robert.
Uh-huh. You could say that this chart is the kingdom of God, right? And by the way, that goes all the way down and includes us. And below that, if you look at the kingdom of God as dualistic, that is to say, that of which you're not a part, in other words, that which is, quote, higher, unquote, than you, then, first of all, it's an artificial separation, but it would be described very well by this chart. There's many ways of looking at that. For instance, the idea of sacred and non-sacred planets, even within what's attained in terms of soul consciousness and which root races, which is, the 6th and 7th, where you become soul infused at any particular level. But it gets pretty arbitrary because it's always relative to that which is above it and below it. As Paul Simon said, one man's ceiling is another man's floor. Anyone else?
Well, Christine's still got her hand up, but
I saw it go up again. Well,
yeah. Did you want to say something, Christine?
she might be having problems with her.
Well, I unmute her and she mutes herself again. So,
well, you can cut in whenever you'd like, but we're going to go ahead.
Okay.
Unless there's other questions.
I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, good. All right. Next, we move into this very luscious old commentary. It's the C section of the commentary for this verse. And could we get, I'm going to ask specifically for Carrie to read this because it has a beautiful old commentary, and I'd like to hear his sonorous voice reading it.
Okay.
No pressure, though.
First, this septenary light. Then, C, the divine world. The countless lights lit at the primeval light. The Buddhis, or formless divine souls, of the last Arupa, formless world. The sum total, in the mysterious language of the old stanza. In the catechism, the master is made to ask the pupil, lift thy head, O Lanu. Dost thou see one or countless lights above thee burning in the dark midnight sky? I sense one flame, O Guru Deva. I see countless undetached sparks shining in it. Thou sayest well, and now look around and into thyself. That light which burns inside thee, dost thou feel it different in any wise from the light that shines in thy brother men? It is in no way different, though the prisoner is held in bondage by karma, and though its outer garments delude the ignorant into saying, thy soul and my soul.
Thank you, Carrie. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, first up, the divine world. The countless lights lit at the primeval light, the Buddhis or formless divine souls of the last Arupa, formless world. The sum total in the mysterious language of the old stanza. The divine world is the myriads of enlightened beings. The quote, and that goes to answering, was it Robert that asked that question? I can't remember. About, what is the divine world? So it's the myriads of enlightened beings, the quote, countless lights, which were lit, or speaking systemically, relit by the sevenfold primeval third logos at the beginning of a new cycle. Next comes a further description of these countless lights, the buddhis, or formless divine souls of the last Arupa, formless world, the sum total. These are atmic beings who hold the seed of the new expression during the new cycle, at whatever level of manifestation that cycle will be demonstrating. As an example, here we have illustrated the transference from the culminating Arupa globes of the moon chain to the initiating Arupa globes of the earth chain. This is the sum total described in the text, which references the entire life wave that moves from one cycle to the next. Any thoughts or questions about this? The beautiful old commentary that follows relates, I've put it here next to this wonderful painting by Agnes Pelton, relates the one who is the 7-in-1 primeval light, the quote, one flame, to the many, the quote, countless undetached sparks shining in it. Key here is the word undetached, reminding us of the line, the spark hangs from the flame by the tiniest thread of Fohat, undetached. All the major initiations represent some stage of identification with the one flame, of the unity of the one with the many, made possible because we are essentially and fundamentally undetached, because we are in fact the one in manifestation. The second half of the old commentary references the quote, reflections who are the human immortal monads. The Lanu, obviously an initiate, recognizes and identifies himself with these 7 lights when he realizes, possibly with the help of the master asking the initiatory questions, that there is no difference between the, quote, light that burns within himself and the light that shines within his brother men. And, I would extend that to say the light which is the one flame. Any thoughts or questions? I see a raised hand from the Gritskas. Are you there, Biel?
Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Yes, Francis, I don't know if you have mentioned or talked about Agnes Pelton's artwork, because it's so incredible. And, I'm noticing the dating of that, that you have brought forth to us. I just think it's so incredible. And I've not heard about her or known about her until you have presented this.
Yeah, it was only shortly before I put together my conference presentations for this year that I became aware of her, really just by luck. And yeah, I too find her to be really evocative of the highest principles,
Do you know of her? Was she an esotericist?
Yeah, she was. It turns out that she was indeed Theosophist, in fact, as was some other, interestingly, female early 20th century artist, right? Olga Fröbe Kaptein, who I've shown paintings of, and is the frontispiece for my webinars, and often, actually, it was she knew Alice Bailey. We're talking about Captain now, and Bailey visited her studio, and DK recommended to his group of students that they study her paintings to further understand certain concepts. So you don't need much more endorsement than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a wonderful museum. I'm not sure where I think it might be Tucson, Arizona. It's in Arizona somewhere, of her work. And just do a Google search. You'll get, there's many wonderful images. Okay.
Francis,
Yeah.
I think I may have found what I'm looking for.
Oh, good.
Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, it looks like Alcyone in the middle, and then the outer 7 are the Pleiades, our Sun, Orion, Antares, Draco, Ursa Major, and Sirius.
Yeah, that sounds. I've run across that list before. That sounds correct. So what she's describing here is these, where my cursor is, these other expressions that make, along with our solar logos, a singular expression that is the one about whom not may be said. Okay, but that's all the time we'll spend on that. Let me get out of here and go back.
Okay, and then Gregory says, was Frida Kahlo a theosophist as well?
I'm not sure about that. Can't really say one way or another. Does anybody know? Maybe somebody in the group of attendees knows whether she was.
If they do, they're keeping it to themselves.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So next up, could we get a reader for
Lynn,
this paragraph?
can you read that, please?
The radical unity of the ultimate essence of each constituent part of the compounds in nature, from star to mineral atom, from the highest Dion Chohan to the smallest infusoria, in the fullest acceptation of the term, and whether applied to the spiritual, intellectual, or physical worlds. This is the one fundamental law in occult science. The deity is boundless and infinite expansion, says an occult axiom. And hence, as remarked, the name of Brahma. In Rig Veda, we find the names
Brahmanaspati.
Thank you. And tell me the other one.
Brahaspati.
Oh,
But no, I'm sorry. Brihaspati.
Alternating and equivalent to each other. And see also Brihad Upanishad. Brihaspati is a deity called the father of the gods.
Okay. Any thoughts or questions? First, the quote, radical unity, great term, refers to the identicality of the essence of whatever apparently separated units of consciousness are being considered, no matter at what level of consciousness they have achieved. This truth, the unity of the ultimate essence of each constituent part is, we're told, the one fundamental law of occult science. So the radical unity of apparent diversity is this fundamental law, this one fundamental law. The deity, that is boundless and infinite expansion, is also the source of this radical unity. permeating, quote, the smallest infusoria in stars alike. That's God immanent, God transcendent, and God immanent. By the way, it is this axiom that lifts the concept of brotherhood from a sentiment to an occult science. For brotherhood is achieved through a recognition of the indwelling essence in all. The similarity in language used in the footnote suggests that HPB got her info for this footnote from a classical dictionary of Hindu mythology and religion by John Dowson. This comes up often in the SD. Here's the extended version of the quote. Could we get a reader, please?
Joe, can you read that, please?
Brihaspati. In the Rig Veda, the names Brihaspati and Brahmaspati alternate and are equivalent to each other. They are names of a deity in whom the action of the worshiper upon the gods is personified. He is the suppliant, the sacrificer, the priest, who intercedes with gods on behalf of men and protects mankind against the wicked. Hence, he appears as the prototype of the priests and priestly order, and is also designated as the Purohiti, family priest, or the divine community. He is called in one place the father of the gods, and a widely extended creative power is ascribed to him. He is Brihaspati Buddha, also designated as the shining and the gold-colored, and as having the thunder for his voice. In later times, he is a rishi. He is also regent of the planet Jupiter, and the name is commonly used for the planet itself. In this character, his car is called Nitigosha and is drawn by 8 pale horses.
Thank you, Joe. By the way, there's this extraordinary new video released by NASA of a flyover of, I think it's Io, the moon nearby, and Jupiter. And it's, I know we've all seen pictures in space of Jupiter, but this is something extraordinary. I'm sure a quick Google search would pull it up. So it's easy to interpret this passage exoterically and culturally, that is to say, in terms of men, priests, and gods. But when we take a closer look at the statement, a deity in whom the action of the worshiper is personified, in context with the concept of radical unity, we see that a priest, when personifying the action of the worshiper, in other words, that priest is the action of worship, consciously becomes, like Fohat, Eros, and quote-unquote irrational numbers, a means of demonstrating radical unity, of bridging spirit and form, of gods and man, of bringing through oneself the presence of deity in such a way that it can be experienced by worshipers. Any thoughts or questions about this idea? Again, the purpose here is to move beyond personae, into a recognition that when one, even at the level of being soul infused, begins to be permeated by an energy, and the persona recedes or becomes expressive of that energy. And the higher the initiate, the more that is true, until it becomes completely identified with the energy that flows through that being. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. There is a deep philosophy underlying the earliest worship in the world, that of the sun and of fire. Of all the elements known to the physical science, fire is the one that has ever eluded definite analysis. It is confidently asserted that air is a mixture containing the gases oxygen and nitrogen. We view the universe and the earth as matter composed of definite chemical molecules. We speak of the primitive 10 earths, endowing each with a Greek or Latin name. We say that water is chemically a compound of oxygen and hydrogen.
Thanks, Bial. Any thoughts about this paragraph? Let's continue. We'll come back and bring them together in a minute.
Greg, will you read that next page, please?
Yeah. But I also was saying that when you were talking about the fire and that water is actually a compound, but the thing is, water doesn't burn. We know that. It just basically causes the fire to not come out. But anyway, so now, good. But what is fire then? It is the effect of combustion. We are gravely answered. It is heat and light and motion, and a correlation of physical and chemical forces in general. And this scientific definition is philosophically supplemented by the theological one in Webster's dictionary, which explains fire as the instrument of punishment or the punishment of the impenitent in another state. The state, by the by, being supposed to be spiritual, but alas, the presence of fire would seem to be a convincing proof of its material nature.
Okay, so obviously HPB had to work against, very fundamentalist types in her time. Not that we don't now. So anyway, 133 years later, Merriam-Webster defines fire in almost identical terms, at least for the first definition: the phenomenon of combustion manifested in light, flame, and heat. But to their credit, they've replaced the second fire and brimstone definition instead of a means of punishing the impenitent. We now have, quote, one of the four elements of the alchemists: air, water, fire, and earth. A definite improvement over the 19th century version of their own dictionary. Let's finish this long paragraph. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. Yet, speaking of the illusion of regarding phenomena as simple because they are familiar, Professor Bain says, Logic, Part 2, very familiar facts seem to stand in no need of explanation themselves and to be the means of explaining whatever can be assimilated to them. Thus, the boiling and evaporation of a liquid is supposed to be a very simple phenomenon requiring no explanation and a satisfactory explanation of rare phenomena. That water should dry up is, to the uninstructed mind, a thing wholly intelligible, whereas to the man acquainted with physical science, the liquid state is anomalous and inexplicable. The lighting of a fire by a flame is a great scientific difficulty, yet few people think so.
Thank you. So, as it was in the 1880s, physical science today is big on meticulous observation leading to measurable results, while remaining more or less silent on why these results occur, except in terms of the measurements gained. It's a circular physical plane explanation. Thus, we have something along the lines of this description of water boiling across a number of articles on the subject, which I looked into. This was typical. Inside the bubble is the vapor pressure, and outside is the water pressure. This means that for water to boil, the temperature must increase until the vapor pressure is equal to the outside pressure, and a bubble can form. Meticulous description of physical results. but no information as to the true forces at work. That's because, of course, these forces are not measurable by scientific instruments. This description from Scientific American on how water is created from hydrogen and oxygen goes a bit deeper. Could we get a reader, please?
Robert, can you read that for us, please?
When molecular hydrogen, H2, and oxygen, O2, are combined and allowed to react together, energy is released, and the molecules of hydrogen and oxygen can combine to form either water or hydrogen peroxide. Chemists use redox half reactions to describe thermodynamic processes like the ones embodied by such equations. In both reactions, the hydrogen molecules are oxidized and the oxygen atoms are reduced.
Thank you. This article went on for a couple of pages along this lines with, of course, no mention of why two gases make a liquid, just what happens and how it's physically initiated. The closest I could find to anything philosophical was on the UCSB science line, which states, liquid water is not itself wet, but can make other solid materials wet. For some reason, I found this very funny. I had the same result in my attempt to find anything on why fire is, well, fiery. Lots of entries describing the phenomenon of combustion, but nothing. I could find nothing on why fire is what it is. Okay, next up. Can we get a reader, please?
Joe, can you read that, please?
What says the esoteric teaching with regard to fire? Fire, it says, is the most perfect and unadulterated reflection in heaven as on earth of the one flame. It is life and death, the origin and the end of every material thing. It is divine substance. Thus, not only the fire worshiper, the Parsi, but even the wandering savage tribes of America, which proclaim themselves born of fire, show more science in their creeds and truth in their superstitions than all the speculations of modern physics and learning. The Christian who says God is a living fire and speaks of the Pentecostal tongues of fire and of the burning bush of Moses is as much a fire worshiper as any other heathen. The Rosicrucians, among all the mystics and Kabbalists, were those who defined fire in the right and most correct way.
Thank you, Joe. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph?
Greg adds to his earlier comment, well, he was the last one to do anything, but he says, but I think water can be caused to boil with enough vapor pressure without the addition of heat.
Yeah, well, altitude, which is pressure, it also plays into that. So my guess is you could probably put your hands in boiling water if you're high enough up in the atmosphere because there's so little water pressure. For instance, where I live here at 8,000 feet, water boils at 190 degrees or 191, something like that. So, but let's stay with the focus of this rather than the science of boiling water. In fact, let's finish the paragraph and with it, the commentary on verse 4. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Oh, sorry. Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Procure a 6-penny lamp, keep it only supplied with oil, and you will be able to light it as at its flame the lamps, the candles and fires of the whole globe without. diminishing that flame. If the deity, the radical one, is eternal and in infinite substance, the Lord thy God is a consuming fire and never consumed, then it does not seem reasonable that the occult teaching should be held as unphilosophical when it says, thus were the Arupa and Rupa worlds formed. From one light, 7 lights, from each of the 7, 7 times 7, etc., etc.
Thank you. Thoughts or questions about this last of this very long paragraph? Yeah, I heard an intake. Okay, there are over 660 instances of the word fire in the Secret Doctrine. But perhaps the single most defining statement is on page 2 of volume 1, which states, occultism sums up the one existence thus. Deity is an arcane, living or moving fire, and the eternal witnesses to this unseen presence are light, heat, and moisture. This trinity including and being the cause of every phenomenon in nature. Since noumenal fire and spirit are synonymous, first of all, any questions about this? I did want to address, I believe it was Greg, I think it was Greg that was talking about water and fire. At this noumenal level, water is akin to materiality or the substantive realm. So you have the three she says, the eternal witnesses of this unseen presence, which is, you could say, the absolute or pure spirit, are light, heat, and moisture. So light is very often associated with the second principle, that which comes into being when spirit, through Fohat, is embedded in form, or said another way, when the form aspect is spirit penetrated and infused, right? So you have, in a sense, in these witnesses, the three principles. And together they become the cause of every phenomenon in nature. So I'm thinking this is important enough to take an extended look at fire using the Theosophical Glossary as our guide. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Martha, can you read that, please?
Yes. Has been venerated in all ages as the symbol of spirit as opposed to matter. Its essence or substance is spirit, with essential or substantial air or water considered as primordial elements. It becomes soul. With the further addition of the element earth, it becomes animated bodies because ensouled and enlivened with the attributes and qualities of the preceding more ethereal elements. Great importance was attached in ancient times to keeping alive the sacred fires of hearth and altar. In all this was recognized that terrestrial fire is the representative of celestial fire, a phase of cosmic consciousness. Deity is often spoken of as the cosmic fire of consciousness.
And another reader?
Okay, Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The ancient conception of fire thus embraced far more than the ordinary view of fire as chemical combustion or one of its phenomena. Among all older peoples, fire was multitudinous in both characteristic and attributes, ranging from divine, spiritual, intellectuality through all intermediate stages of its manifestations to the physical heat arising from the burning of material such as wood or the natural heat of the body. It is for this reason that certain ancient philosophers, such as Heraclitus, spoke of fire as the primordial element of the universe in close accord with the archaic outlook.
Thank you, Karen. And next reader, please.
Carrie, can you read that one for us, please? Carrie?
Can you hear me? I just had a problem with my, can you hear me?
Yes, you're
Yes,
fine.
now.
Okay. Fire is the active, energic, vitalizing, quickening principle on all planes. It is often paired with water as spirit and form, contrasted with earth as celestial and terrestrial. Air is spoken of as its vehicle, as is also ether, because the root of cosmic ether is the celestial fire. The order of the elements varies from different points of view and on different planes of manifestation. The Secret Doctrine states that from primordial chaos came forth a fire that was cold, formless, and luminous, essential consciousness, substance. The first manifested hot fires and flames issued at a much later stage in manifestation. Concealed within the central sun is the triple formless, invisible fire, which precedes the septenary manifested fire of cosmos. Fire, whether heavenly or terrestrial, is the most perfect and pure reflection of the one universal flame. It is life and death, creator and recreator, the origin and end of every material thing, divine consciousness, substance. From one flame all lamps can be kindled. Fire imparts infinitely without loss. Fire alone is one, on the plane of the one reality, and on the plane of illusion, its particles are fiery lives.
Thank you, Carrie. And finally, and I think I'll read this upper part. This engraving, one of a series of 12th, 17th century pictorial keys of the alchemist, contains symbols that refer to stages in the alchemical process. Fire, an external force in alchemy, is here shown burning in a wooden brazier. Alchemical texts often refer to a cool fire, which heats the contents of the alchemist's vessel gently, like a chicken incubating her eggs. The lion and snake are both symbols of raw, unrefined matter. Okay, and then a reader for the text, please.
Like most other things, fire has its nether pole and hence its infernal aspect. But the fires of hell are purificatory. By this power of self-conscious choice, an individual may set himself at variance with nature's processes, thus creating his own devils. Fire was the great agent of purification in medieval alchemy, for it removes the dross from the gold. The same is true on the moral plane, for spiritual aspiration calls down an inner fire that purifies the gold from the dross in the aspirant's heart. The two births or baptisms relate to water and fire, the former being carnal, the latter being the spiritual birth or baptism that comes to the aspirant.
Thanks, BL. And finally, let's wrap up this mini tutorial on fire with a quote from the Secret Doctrine. The reader, please.
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
We go. fire and flame destroy the body of an arhat, their essence makes him immortal. Bodhi Mirbach 2. The knowledge of the absolute spirit, like the effulgence of the sun, or like heat in fire, is not else than the absolute essence itself, says Sankaracharya. Is the spirit of fire, not fire itself, therefore. The attributes of the latter, heat or flame, are not the attributes of the spirit, but of that of which that spirit is the unconscious cause.
Thank you. I think by now we're starting to get a sense of the difference between noumenal fire, the absolute essence, and fire on the physical plane, and the intermediate stages as well. Because it is also an agent of Fohat, who is electrical in nature, and fire, being essentially spirit, is married through Fohat with the form aspect, thus becoming the fire within the heart, the fire within the form, that gives it its vitality and its consciousness, because fire in its early demonstration comes into being as consciousness. Okay, having studied HPB's commentary on verse 4, let's turn our attention to the verse itself. And you know what? I want to end with this discussion on fire, because this is a whole section to analyze this verse. So this is a natural stopping place. We're just a couple of minutes out. So any final ideas connected with this very important topic of fire?
Christine's got her hand up.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, go ahead.
The resurrection flame is something I got out of the 7 sacred flames. A prayer I say, I am that and that am I, the resurrection flame. Also, Saint Germain and the violet flame. You know, it's you've just added to the context is what I'm saying, because these are not consuming flames.
Except in the sense of the form aspect. It takes you ever towards essence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's a very first aspect concept. It's sort of unrelentingly spirit based, right? So, you know, for instance, the description of Pluto, which is the first rate planet, it says, you know, that it destroys hindrances and yet never touches the animating indwelling self, right? You could say a version of that for Vulcan as well. And so they're, you know, the fact that they're fiery based is, especially Vulcan, it's very clear, you know, and there's, say, in some ways, similar things about Mercury being that point in the circle that is the fiery essence of the sun. But again, this...
You know this quote by Desjardins, when we have discovered fire? I don't know all of it, but maybe somebody knows in that context again. When man again has discovered fire, and I'm just taking it out of context.
You mean rediscovered fire as the guiding principle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By Desjardins.
No, and I don't know it. Maybe somebody here does. I don't know it.
I have it someplace, but right now I'm consumed with all of this information.
Yeah, well, good. And all these webinars could be revisited. In some ways, they're designed to be revisited. Especially visually, because you can ponder this information if you so desire. Any other thoughts?
Greg's got his hand up. Go ahead, Greg.
In terms of the fire qualities, I relate fire to water in the quality that, from a very physical form-based perspective, we look at our own earth and we know that in the core of our earth, they keep on saying, and I think they've proven it, that it's basically a liquid fire, that it's molten lava is the form of our earth. And out of that, as we grow up towards the through the mantle and the atmosphere and into where most of us live our lives in the everyday world, every level of that growing upwards is a quality of the water being transformed, or the liquid. It's not necessarily the water, but there's a liquid element starting at the very core essence of the earth, and we move through all the layers of our earth to our atmosphere, and then finally to, our atmosphere is huge, but at that very highest places of our atmosphere, there's still extreme enough heat that defines our whole environmental existence, because there's also water. Water is turned into plasma. Water is turned into vapor at the very highest. And then if we can move out from there, we can expand even further out into our solar system, etc., and notice that they're just different steps down or up, kind of a united involutionary and evolutionary process of the core essence of fire at the core of the earth. And at each level, the heat causes certain variations in the water vapor, or turns water from liquid to boiling to vapor, and on and on and on, until you're getting into plasma and higher gaseous qualities. So
may I read you Pierre Teilhard Desjardins? It's really for Greg, because Greg is actually saying the same things, at least I'm hearing that way.
Sure, go ahead.
Teilhard was a paleontologist. He said, someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then, for a second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire.
Oh, that's the quote.
That was the quote that.
Excellent.
Really reading.
Yeah, and what he spans there, and what he's indicating is that we will span the objective and subjective to the subjective. That will move into the causal essence of things.
Exactly, because he believed in the ontology of the stones, and he was silenced by the church for his discovery.
I would imagine so. Yeah. It's helpful to start with the idea that everything is in essence fiery, that at its core is the spirit of fire. All elements move out from that unified principle, including water, which is extraordinary, because we have watery plains that are beyond literal water, right? So you could say that water is a configuration of a certain energy that in its essence is fiery, which is, a mind blower, but nonetheless. And I think we'll leave it at that, something to contemplate. So could we get dates, please?
Yes, the next Secret Doctrine is going to be the 15th of August at 7 p.m. But of course, before that, we're going to have the next Secret Teaching of All Ages, which is going to be 1 August at 7 p.m. So
we spoke quite a bit about Atlantis today in terms of the root races, sub-races, etc. And that is the current subject of the Secret Teachings of All Ages. We will be diving in. This is about, I think it's going to be a 4-webinar series on Atlantis. And we deal somewhat with the physical nature of it, which Plato talked a lot about, but the emphasis is on the subjective aspects of Atlantis, what it meant, the nature of the root race. In other words, what HPB and DK said, and also surprisingly, Manly P. Hall and other of his publications talked with great wisdom about the nature of Atlantis. So I hope you'll join us. That's on what date again in August?
The 1st
First
of
Sunday.
August for Secret Teachings.
Okay, so 2 weeks from today. Is that correct? I believe it is, yeah. So, yeah, because we're on the 18th. So, yeah, 2 weeks from today. Okay, real good. Thank you all. It's a real privilege.
And we had one comment about the leveling the audio for everybody, and I'm sorry we can't do that because each individual controls their own audio. So some people will have theirs, turned down and it'll be low, and others will have it turned up and they'll be booming in your ears. So I'm sorry about that. It isn't standard because we all control our own audio. So sorry.
This is just Zoom. It's not a sound studio, unfortunately. No, but generally, I haven't heard too much trouble. Martha, your connection with your mic, your first time around was a little weak.
No, if you want me to change it.
I'm finished. I'm finished.
Yeah, we're hearing.
Okay, I'll be more conscious about that, Francis. I have.
Okay, yeah. Anyway, thank you
Francis, all. Francis, your volume is way up.
Yeah, it's much louder than everybody else.
Yeah.
And it's a bit
too loud.
distorted
I can
as
turn
well.
down. I can easily turn down.
Yeah, because it's a bit distorted.
Yeah, maybe next time.
Tell me, Biel, tell me early on with that, because I get no feedback,
Okay.
just hear my own voice. So there's no way, but thank you for that. I can easily fix that. Okay, you all.
All right.
Until next time.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.